What's up folks, Crush SG back with an update to my Walking Arsenal build video. Now I'm going to attempt to keep this one a little shorter, so for a more in-depth guide on my Walking Arsenal Whirlwind build, check out the full build guide link in the description or in the cards. Okay, so I'm sure many of my fellow spin to winners have at some point considered going dual wield for Whirlwind. I mean, dual wielding was basically the way to go for Whirlwind builds in both D2 and D3, so it's only natural to at least want to try it out in D4. And maybe some of you were turned away from it after being told by any content creator that two-handers were better, or perhaps some of you, like me, actually tried dual wielding at some point and realized one-handers hit like soggy overcooked noodles. Now, I'm not here to debunk any myths or buck any trends. Two-handers are excellent choices for Whirlwind and probably are still the way to go for the most part. But the purpose of this video is simply to share something interesting that I discovered over the last couple of days. Now, this is Ramaladni's magnum opus. I hope I said the name right. It is a one-handed unique sword, and unless I'm the luckiest player on the planet, this has to be one of the most common uniques found on a barbarian. Its bonus reads, skills using this weapon deal up to 0.3% increased damage per point of fury that you have, but you lose 2 fury per second. Now, the first time I found this sword was when I did my first ever Helltide way back after unlocking World Tier 3. Needless to say, I was super excited, it's a unique, and immediately tried to look up information on this sword. Now, unfortunately, there is painfully little information out there on it, and I even found claims on Reddit that the bonus not only doesn't apply to Whirlwind, but you still had a Fury Drain while having it equipped. I eventually, out of curiosity, I equipped it myself to test it out, and it did feel incredibly underwhelming at the time, so I basically stashed it and mentally labeled the sword as a trash unique ever since. Now fast forward to about 2 days ago and some 10 or so Ramaladni drops later, and what do you know, I had it drop again. Now this one was basically an instant trash one because the rolls were terrible, but looking at it, something just kind of clicked in my brain. You see, over the last week or so, I've been slowly putting together some maximum fury items for a Hota build, and well, Ramaladni's bonus does say increased damage per point of fury, which happens to be exactly what Hota does. Now, I knew I'd have somewhere in the ballpark of about 210 max fury in my Hota build, so with some quick math, that suggested this sword could give me over 60% multiplicative damage with that much fury. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ran to my stash, I pulled out the best rolled version of this sword that I had, upgraded it, and proceeded to dive down the testing rabbit hole again. Now, needless to say, based on the title of the video and the background gameplay, it should be pretty obvious what the result was. I discovered that the old Reddit post was clearly wrong, and this bonus does in fact benefit Whirlwind. Not only that, but like basically everything else with Whirlwind, the bonus seems to snapshot on channel. The initial test I had done way back then was so underwhelming simply because I was too low level and I didn't have any points or any items that added to maximum fury. There is also the matter of the 2 fury drain per second, and those who watch my build guide should know that that makes absolutely no difference because this build has such a ridiculous amount of fury generation anyway. Now, with some minor tweaks to the build, which I will summarize in a bit, I am able to crit for anywhere between 900k to about 1.2 million with this sword, and this is not only a couple of 100,000 higher than the numbers I produce using my near perfect rolled almost 3000 DPS item power 842 two-handed sword, but it actually comes within 200 to 300,000 of the numbers I put out using my two-handed mace. More importantly, I'm putting out these numbers all while hitting at the much faster tick rate of dual wield weapons. Now, I haven't quite crunched the numbers or done any frame by frame testing, but what I will say is Whirlwind seems to tick at least 20% faster using dual wield weapons, and this does line up with the base speeds of the various weapon types. 1.1 for dual wield, 1.0 for two-handed swords, and 0.9 for two-handed maces. Now what this translates to is that Ramaladni's not only puts out close to 50% more practical DPS than my two-handed sword build, but it might even eclipse the DPS output of my hyper-optimized two-handed mace build. I mean, look at the background gameplay. I basically chain ran a whole bunch of T72s without much fuss. I think I died once in the 6 or so test runs that I did. Now all this was in halter gear that I didn't even properly optimize and with placeholder aspects because I just didn't want to waste perfect rolled aspects on a test build. Now my two-handed mace build farms low T70s like a boss. But I actually still need to concentrate when farming them, and depending on the modifiers, things can actually get pretty hairy. I didn't expect to be able to kind of breeze through these 5 or 6 T72 runs with a dual wheel build, and that was kind of surprising and actually pretty refreshing at the same time. Anyway, this build is nowhere near complete. There are plenty of optimizations to be done, but I will just quickly go over the basic changes I made to accommodate dual wielding into my Walking Arsenal build. First, I dropped the last Paragon board entirely to free up points for the Max Fury nodes in the Warbringer board. Then I removed the Might glyph and moved the Territorial glyph into its slot. And then I put the Wrath glyph on the first board. Though I'm still undecided as to whether the Wrath glyph or the Ire glyph would be better. I'm thinking that Ire might be the better choice since Wrath only benefits Whirlwind and this build has more skills than just Whirlwind. Now in the gear department, of course I swapped out both my rings for ones that gave maximum fury. They are decently rolled rings but could be better. I also don't have a spare Berserk Fury aspect, so I put the aspect of the Umbral on one of my rings, which works well too. And I have Relentless Arms Master on the other to ensure that I'm basically fully Fury capped at all times. I also swapped my helm out for one with maximum fury, and it has a really low armor roll and a plus to all stats, which is not great but necessary at the moment for my Paragon board. I didn't want to waste a perfect rolled Iron Blooded, so I put a non-perfect aspect of Might on it, and it has done fine so far. I also had to swap my amulet out because my other one had bonus to heavy-handed, which only affects two-handed weapons. So I equipped the one that had bonus to counter-offensive, which benefits all damage. And of course I swapped out one of my swords for Ramaladni's, and this means I do lose Encroaching Wrath, but that's fine, it still works. I also swapped out the second sword for the highest DPS one-handed sword that I have, and I put the aspect of the Expectant on it, though again I'm kinda undecided if that is the best aspect to use here. I could go with, say, the Accelerating aspect to make the rotation smoother, or even Berserk Ripping, and then swap from Furious Whirlwind to Violent Whirlwind in the skill tree. Now speaking of the skill tree, I removed points that I had in Wallop and Concussion, but I kept the points in Heavy-handed because I still assign a two-handed weapon to Death Blow. I also swapped to Furious Whirlwind for the Bleed proc, but as I mentioned before, I could swap back to Violent Whirlwind and put Berserk Ripping somewhere. And with the spare points, I maxed out No Mercy and the max HP node, and I'm considering putting points back into Pressure Point because with the faster hit rate of Dual Wield, it might increase the proc rate of Vulnerable, but we'll see how it goes. More testing is required. Anyway, that's it for the build update. I just thought this was interesting and I wanted to share it. Thumbs up if you liked it, down if you didn't. Share my build with your friends if they are interested in something off meta, and I'll catch you later, folks.